his alleged victim. Again, an elderly man who is so disfigured he can't even speak, sliced through the face right into his tongue. You may have looked right past the mystery because of all the grossness, but the mystery is what on earth possessed Mark Sanchez, a well-known, well-liked, and very well-paid former athlete and Fox Sports analyst, to allegedly go to war over a parking space in a downtown alley at midnight. It is not like Sanchez wanted to park there at that loading dock, where that victim, Mr. Perry Toll, was offloading cooking oil at a hotel for recycling. Far from it. Police say before Sanchez even got violent, he was doing wind sprints in that alley, up and down, in his fancy clothes, in a city he was only visiting to call Sunday's NFL game. Yes, this alley is just down the street from a bar, and yes, Sanchez is also charged with public intoxication. The delivery truck driver told the police that Sanchez smelled of booze, but Sanchez told police he does not remember how Mr. Perry Toll came to be beaten half to death, or how he, Sanchez, ended up with multiple stab. But he should read the police affidavits because, man, there's some information in there. According to those, Sanchez, who's 38, told the victim that he had to move his truck. And when the victim didn't, Sanchez tried to get inside said truck. And when Mr. Toll tried to stop him, police say Sanchez beat him up. Cops say the victim tried to pepper spray Sanchez first, but that had no effect, at which point the victim, according to cops, pulled a knife and stabbed Sanchez in the chest until Sanchez let up. The severity of the older man's injuries led the authorities to add a felony battery count to the 3 misdemeanors that Sanchez was initially facing. But when we brought you this story last night, you heard the DA say that the evidence is still being gathered and more charges may well be coming. And now we know what some of that evidence is. It happens to be the same evidence that investigators are waiting on in another blockbuster story that we've been covering, the mysterious case of Celeste Rivas Hernandez, who was found dead in a singer's Tesla. It's toxicology reports. That's what they're waiting on, a series of drug tests that in the Sanchez case may help to explain his bizarre and atypical behavior. A former teammate from the New York Jets tells the New York Post that the attack was, quote, completely out of character for Mark Sanchez, the Mark that he knew. But that does not mean much to Mr. Toll, whose attorney says is, quote, thankful to be alive, end quote, but heartsick that he won't be able to attend his own son's wedding next week. He may, however, be able to spring for one hell of a honeymoon in the not-too-distant future if Sanchez and Fox decide not to fight his lawsuit. Mr. Sanchez is due to make an appearance in criminal court in November. And that brings me to my first guest, who I am thrilled to finally have on this program. Jose Baez is a megastar in criminal justice, whose former clients, as I mentioned, include another ex-footballer, Aaron Hernandez, as well as Casey Anthony. It's great to have you on the show, Jose. It's nice to see you again, too.
It's great seeing you. It's been a long time.
Oh, my gosh, the time we spent in that Orlando courtroom together, months and months on end, getting to know each other. Lovely to see you after all these years. Let me just ask you right off the bat, do you think that Mark Sanchez, as famous as he is going to get a fair shake in the criminal justice system?
I certainly hope so. I don't know how many fans he has in Indianapolis, but I can tell you there's something about this case that rubs me the wrong way. I'm not exactly sure it's being covered the way perhaps it should be, or the questions that are being asked, or the right questions are being asked, I should say.
So tell me, what do you mean by that?
Well, it doesn't make any sense if you even the way you explained it. I mean, to have what does Mark Sanchez care about where a truck driver parks? That doesn't make any sense. This certainly could be a situation where 2 guys got into it, and one had 2 weapons. And the other one, of course, was younger and got the best of them. So it's really too soon to tell. But a lot of the evidence just doesn't match up as far as I'm concerned. Mr. Toll's the one who brought a knife to a fist fight, as well as pepper spray. So no one's asking him any questions, of course, and that's because, of course, he got beat up. But this could be a very solid self-defense case for Mr. Sanchez as well.
So interesting you say that, because I was so flummoxed as to how they charged so quickly. But as it turns out, there is a lot of surveillance video in between these two fancy hotels. And I think the police got their hands on the surveillance video very quickly, and it matched up with what Mr. Toll was saying, which, I mean, even as a defense attorney, you got to admit, ugh, those are bad facts for Sanchez.
Well, I haven't seen any of that released. I just see him bloodied walking down the street. I think that they can release some of that video, especially if they're releasing others, as well as other photographs and other images. So, especially in a case like this, I've seen and had cases out of Indianapolis, so I know that law enforcement does release video during the pendency of a case. It's not something that's specifically being withheld. I mean, specifically being withheld for a legal reason. I've seen it released before.
Yeah, and hey, not for lack of trying. We're trying our damnedest to get our hands on that, as is every other media outlet, you know, this side of Indianapolis. But I do want to ask you about the toxicology. I was sort of, I don't know, confused by prosecutors waiting on toxicology. That's usually something we want to know for dead people, not for people who are charged with felonies, because you tell me, you're the lawyer. As I understand it, it doesn't matter to nobody if you were drunk or high committing a felony, right?
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I think what the reason why they're actually requesting it is to counter any potential defenses of self-defense. So if you can have a determination as to what his blood alcohol level was, you can actually make arguments as to how impaired Mr. Sanchez actually was. And there's another thing that might also possibly come out in this, and that is, you mentioned he was at a bar previously. His drink could have been spiked by someone. He could have had something in his drink, and that might have affected his memory. There are any number of things that could have happened in that bar that perhaps tell the rest of the story. And of course, as a criminal defense lawyer, one of the first things that I would be asking is, he's at the hospital, you can draw his blood, and in fact, it probably did draw his blood. So why didn't you test it? So I think they're doing their due diligence on that end.
That's where I was going. That's what I thought, especially if I were a defending person. I would say, well, let's find out what happened before all of this that made him do wind sprints in the alley, you know, dressed in his nice clothes at midnight. It just seems like really erratic behavior. So tell me, you know, going back to that same question, if that is in fact the case, if there's, you know, surveillance video in a bar that shows somebody spiking Mark Sanchez's drink, how does that mitigate the case against him, or does it?
Well, if it's a type of drug that would affect him in some way, there could be arguments that can be made depending on the law in that specific jurisdiction. There are mental incapacitation and voluntary intoxication defenses, different things that might come into play that relate to drugs or alcohol, specifically if it's to the extent where a person is completely out of it and doesn't know what they're doing, or something to that effect. I don't think we have that in this case, because you have a fight, and obviously he was able to fight, and he's able to walk and things like that. But it could also, he's made statements where he doesn't recall or remember. If he in fact was drugged, or if he has an intoxication level that is extremely high, that would tend to bode well for him and support his statements to the police. You know, I think what's going to happen is a prosecutor's going to get up there and say, well, he claims he didn't know what happened, and he's lying. Therefore, he's lying to the police, and the only reason he did that is because of consciousness of guilt. Well, that's not necessarily the case if you're extremely intoxicated or you've been drugged in some way or fashion. So these are things. This could play well for Mr. Sanchez, or it could not. And certainly the way it was tested, and all of these things are going to come into play, and the accuracy of the results as well.
So the prosecutor in this case, Ryan Mears, was on Elizabeth Vargas's program earlier this evening on NewsNation, and I wanted you to hear what he had to say about the potential for upgrading the charges against Mark Sanchez. Let's roll it.
Yeah, so one of the things in the state of Indiana is you can actually upgrade the battery charge from a level 5 felony to a level 3 felony if you have what is known as permanent or protracted loss. And that's one of those situations where you're looking for a healthcare provider, a doctor in particular, to be able to provide that diagnosis and say, what's the long-term impact of these injuries and how is it going to impact the victim? And so those are our conversations that we'll have with the treating physicians, the doctors involved with this in this case, and that'll help us make that ultimate charging decision.
So, Jose, the victim in this case, Mr. Toll, was stabbed through the cheek. This is so gross, and I'm sorry to say it. It's important, though, with regard to what Mr. Mears just said. He was stabbed through the cheek, and his tongue was even cut. Do you think that rises to the level of the kind of long-term injuries that might actually warrant upgraded charges in this case?
It could, and there's certainly no preclusion for the prosecutor to argue that. But I can tell you what the prosecutor is doing in this case is extremely inappropriate. This is a person who has been entrusted with a position of public trust to be going out and giving interviews, appearing on TV shows and different things like that is highly inappropriate. I know you know that firsthand, how many times you would love to talk to a prosecutor, but they just simply can't. And the reason for that is you don't want to ever give off the impression that you're seeking the spotlight or that you're prosecuting someone so that way you can go in front of the spotlight, because that's simply the argument right here and right now is what are you doing going on TV and giving interviews when in fact you should keep your head down and you should be focusing on your job and what the people elected you to do, which is do your job as a prosecutor, not going around giving interviews on a specific case that you're involved in. I think that's incredibly inappropriate. And then to be going out and giving facts, all of this goes on top of that goes counter to Mr. Sanchez's right to a fair trial and an impartial jury pool. All of these things are highly inappropriate for a prosecutor to be doing. And there's no reason or excuse for him to be doing that.
I always think they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't when it's a high-profile trial, because people just, take the battering ram to them for not talking. Jose Baez, I sure hope this is the first of many more appearances on the Banfield program. Now that you came through unscathed and you did such a great job, I sure appreciate this. Thank you.
Likewise, likewise. It's great seeing you again, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.